Hey everyone, I'm Peter and I'm going to rank every movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This list is subjective, it is not meant to be a definitive list, it is purely down to taste, down to preferences, and down to what moved me the most. Number 22, Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is at the bottom of the list because, I'll be honest, I don't like magic that much. I don't think he's an interesting character. I thought the movie, well, it gets praised for its visuals and its wackiness and its sort of surrealism. Ultimately, I think the direction's pretty weak. The director, Scott Derrickson, also made Sinister. I think both Sinister and Doctor Strange are really poorly made movies. I don't think they work very well. I think they're kind of dull to watch. I've only seen this one once. I'm probably never going to go back and watch it again. That's okay. 21. Captain America, the First Avenger. Why is this so low? People love this movie. I never really liked it that much. I remember when I went to see it back in 2011 and I was kind of lukewarm on it. I thought Red Skull was really cheesy. I thought it was chewing scenery. I thought it was a bit too sentimental and saccharine for my taste. And it's not that I'm necessarily against those things in general. It's just that I don't think that movie by Joe Johnston really captured what I would have wanted. I remember thinking, why is the character of that phase 1 batch of movies of the Avengers, why is Captain America the one who should be the most down to earth and his combat's a little bit more, hand to hand, stunt work, that kind of things? It seemed to have the worst visual effects. There was a lot of really bad green screen, just lots of things I wasn't really feeling in that movie. The movie actually failed to sell me on Captain America as a character, because much like most of the characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I wasn't that familiar with them before the movies, and this one did not sell me on Cap as a character. Number 20, Iron Man 2. Iron Man 2, widely regarded as one of the worst movies in the entire thing, is very much seen as the setup for Avengers. It feels like it was maybe... The movies from the Marvel movies do tend to kind of come out fairly quickly, but I think this one felt a bit more rushed than most of the movies in the whole franchise, partly because it was like, oh, Iron Man was successful, we have to put this one out, and we have to set up Black Widow, we have to set up these other things, we have to tease all the other characters for Avengers, and it feels a little bit more prequel-y when you watch it now, in comparison to a lot of the other ones. That's not to say there's not bright spots. Obviously John Cheadle was added to this film, he's very good. Justin Hammer from Sam Rockwell, very enjoyable. There are definitely some things in here. One of my biggest problems with Iron Man 2 is, aside from the messy script and of course the weak villain, which a lot of these movies have, even the good ones, we have a problem where I kind of felt it was lacking in action, which is kind of ridiculous to think about now when we think about the recent Marvel movies. But Iron Man 2, there's so much build up, and then the final action scene is really, really quick and not that engaging. Even the race car or the racetrack sequence, there's a great build up. There's a great suit forming moment. One of my favorite things about Iron Man is when the suit goes on him, and then the fight's over within 30 seconds. It's a really kind of blue balls movie, I think. Number 19, Thor the Dark World. Thor the Dark World, another one that's widely considered as one of the weakest films in the entire universe. Thor the Dark World suffers from a messy plot, another weak villain, of course. Obviously, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes turmoil, but Natalie Portman not wanting to be there. All these things kind of adding up to make kind of a mediocre movie. Again, much like Iron Man 2, there's a couple of things that are likeable in it. Mainly, we have a lot of comedy in the movie. I remember enjoying it at the time, although admittedly I've not seen it in a long time, so maybe that comedy won't work for me as much as it did back in the day. But I remember a lot of Thor and Loki's lines being kind of amusing. I like the idea of the final battle, at least, going through portals and portals, but other than that, not a whole lot to write home about. Number 18, Thor. Yeah, that's right. Thor, I've got placed just above the second Thor. Thor, I think it's a fine film. I remember enjoying it more than I thought it would when it came out. I didn't think it would appeal to me, and the fish out of water elements lended itself to a lot of good humour, and there was definitely some fun stuff in there. I think the reason why Thor places so low is I don't think it would have done in the past, is I tried to rewatch it a couple of years ago, sometime in the build up to Infinity War, I think, maybe towards the end of 2017, and I had a hard time getting through it. I found it kind of dull to watch now. I don't think it's maybe held up super great. And I think part of that might be because we're so used to this universe being so full that the simpleness of the Phase 1 movies might kind of suffer in some ways. Thor might be the one that suffers from that the most, in that it is very kind of, in its own little bubble. It's kind of very just this fish out of water story. There's definitely still humour to be had there, and I enjoyed it when it came out, but it's suffered with time, and I find it a little bit of a tedious watch now. 17, Ant-Man. Ant-Man was a movie I was very much worried about before it came out, partly because of the Edgar Wright controversy. He was going to write and direct. They still kind of used his script, but it was obviously another director in the chair when the time came. And Ant-Man is another example of one of the weakest villains. Yellow Jacket in this movie is completely just there. There is no reason for him. He just exists because the movie needs a villain. That said, there is a lot of things to like about Ant-Man. Paul Rudd's very good. Evangeline Lilly, very good. Michael Douglas, very good. It's a great cast. Funny characters. This is kind of the part of the list where we're getting to, okay, I don't necessarily love these movies, but there's a lot to like in them, and they're generally pretty enjoyable. I think, we're out of the bad movies, definitely, by the time we get to Thor and Ant-Man. And Ant-Man has a lot of heart and a lot of things to like about it, even if the actual plot and especially the villain are pretty lackluster. 16, Ant-Man and the Wasp. That's right. This is the second time I've had two films and the same character back to back. Ultimately, it was just really hard to separate Ant-Man and the Wasp from the first Ant-Man. I think it's a very similar film in quality. I think it's slightly better because I think the relationship with his daughter has a lot of heart and adds to the film. I like that Wasp, Evangeline Lilly's character, gets a lot more time and feels more prominent in the film. And there's, again, it's really funny. There's, obviously everyone loves Lewis, and there's side characters who are a blast to have around. It definitely suffers again from feeling like it's very inconsequential in terms of its main plot. Of course, the mid-credit scene does feel very important for the next big film in the franchise. But Ant-Man and the Wasp is a fun time, but ultimately feels like an inconsequential film, but a lot of fun regardless. Number 15, Iron Man. This is going to seem super low to some people. The first Iron Man movie coming in at number 15. Iron Man, of course, it deserves a lot of credit for starting this universe. It deserves a lot of credit for Robert Downey Jr.'s performance. And while I don't think the villain's that great, I do like Jeff Bridges a lot, so, nice to see him all the same. I think Iron Man 1 is a solid popcorn movie. I don't think it's as great as other people say it is. I don't think it's worth putting in the pedestal, and my main reason for that, I think, is Act 3. I think the third act in this movie, the fight with the villain at the end, much like Iron Man 2 in a lot of ways, is very lackluster, and I think ultimately I just don't find that exciting. And it's not just that I don't find it exciting now, I never really found it that exciting. Even when I saw it in 2008, I always thought it was the weakest part of the movie was that last third, and it's never kind of got out of that for me. And there's definitely things you look back at now that they never paid off on, or they changed their minds where they were going with certain things, and I don't really hold that against it. But I think the third act and the villain, but there's a lot of heart in there. The robots, Pepper, all these things add up, and it is a very well put together movie. Even if I think we've long eclipsed it in terms of what we can do in the cinematic universe. Number 14, The Incredible Hulk. Yes, I am going to get comments about this. Yes, I like The Incredible Hulk a little bit more than the first Iron Man, and I know that's controversial. I know people aren't going to like me saying that, but here's the thing: I like that Hulk movie. I as much as I think I like Mark Ruffalo more than I do Edward Norton, I thought Edward Norton was fine in that movie, and I like the Hulk action. I like the monster and the Beauty and the Beast element to it. I like that side of things. I like the big scene at the university. I like rooting for the Hulk when the evil assholes are coming after him. I like, the Hulk having to accept the Hulk as a possible solution for the problem of the Abomination. I like all these elements. I like William Hurt. There's so much of that movie I really like, and I really hope that there's more Hulk in this universe, and I hope that we do eventually bring back the leader. And I got really excited about Civil War when they were bringing back William Hurt, because I thought finally something from that movie to make it feel a bit more connected. So I dig Hulk. I mean, it's got problems, but I really like the action. I think out of Phase 1, not counting the Avengers, just counting the Phase 1 origin movies, I think Hulk might have my favourite action of any of them. Maybe even my favourite plot of any of them. So, yeah, Incredible Hulk. I'll rep you, Hulk. Number 13, Civil War. Yes, Captain America Civil War is number 13. This might seem a little bit low to some people. Civil War is actually a really interesting point in the MCU for me, where I was really into it after Avengers, and I was into it through Phase 2. And I remember feeling a little bit deflated with Civil War. It's not that Civil War is a bad movie. In fact, it's in the middle. I've put it above other movies that I like on this list. I think there's a lot of things to really get into in Captain America Civil War. I think it has some structural problems. I think the Civil War element itself in the movie is a little bit forced, and it's like we want to sell the movie based on that airport scene. We want to put that in the poster, the lineups, where the real interesting part of the movie comes after that. But you're a little bit deflated because you've just sat through 40 minutes of airport action stuff. So that kind of hurts a little bit for me. And I remember that was the first time I felt like it felt less like a movie and more like just the next part in the overall MCU story. And it kind of felt a bit weird that first time when it felt like that, where it didn't feel like it had like a satisfying like story that ended in one movie for me. And I think others have done a better job of that since then. But this first one with Civil War felt a little bit unfulfilling. I kind of left the theater being kind of like, I feel a little bit down on that. I don't know. I'm not that excited by this movie. As much as I wanted to be. But there's a lot of good things in there. The characters across the board are great. You know, Spider-Man's first appearance is great. The action is impressive. I just wish it had more bite. Because no one's really trying to kill anyone in the airport scene, it doesn't have the same bite to it that a lot of the other movies do in terms of their action scenes. But having a lot of the characters interact, I loved Ant-Man with Captain America and the others, and I loved introducing to Black Panther, who again is a character that I didn't really know anything about before this movie. There's a lot of stuff to like in Civil War. In fact, Baron Zemo might be one of the more interesting villains of the MCU. It's just a shame that for me, I feel like the film is a little bit bloated and it feels a little bit unfulfilling as its own chapter, as opposed to part of the whole. I think as part of the tapestry of the whole MCU and the story of like Tony and Cap and everything that they go through the whole thing, there's a lot of good stuff in there in hindsight. But it definitely feels a little bit bloated. Number 12, Captain Marvel. Yes, one of the newest ones here, of course, on the list. Captain Marvel, again, much like a lot of these films in the middle of the list, does have problems. I think the cinematography is pretty mundane and at times is underexposed, and I had a kind of an unpleasant visual look to it a lot of the time. What I liked about Captain Marvel, really, I can't talk about too much because I'm trying to keep this fairly spoiler-free, but I do like what it does with the villains, and I like what it does with some of the alien mythology, because obviously we got some alien mythology from the Guardians of the Galaxy films. Captain Marvel introduces a whole new element with the Skrulls. I like what it did with that. It kind of surprised me. I like Captain Marvel's chemistry with Nick Fury. I like her deadpan humor. I like a lot of that stuff. And when there's a few odd choices in the movie, but I like when she kind of goes full supernova, basically, and gets all of her power. There's a lot of excitement there. Plus, it has a cat in it, and the cat's great. More Marvel movies need cats as main characters. I want Goose and Rocket to have a team up movie. Basically, is what I'm saying, and I'll be down for that. Number 11, Thor Ragnarok, ranking fair bit higher than the first two Thor movies. Thor Ragnarok is a very entertaining film with a lot of great comedy. Taika Waititi, if I say his name correctly, who directed this, is of course very talented when it comes to humor, and this film is full of it. In fact, if I have the reason why it's only at number 11 and not higher is I actually think the one thing that hurts in the movie is that the central villain and sort of threat that we're building up to facing in the film, I think is very lackluster, and ultimately I don't really care that much about it. But everything else with the characters interacting with Hulk and Thor and Loki and Valkyrie and Korg and the other new characters, like Waititi's own character, the alien that he plays. All of that stuff is hilarious. There's a lot of great callbacks. There's a lot of fun adventure vibe to it. It's very sort of punk rock or, synth rock, I should probably say. And it's funny because I think Thor's a character who over these movies has changed a lot. I think they realised that Chris Hemsworth could be very funny, and they kind of pivoted his character to more of a comedy character, which if you go back to the first Thor feels kind of weird. Looking at this first Thor movie, and that humour's not quite there. There's a lot of funny stuff in that movie, but it's very different in Thor Ragnarok. It's definitely much more of a comedy, and that's something that stuck with the character. So, but Thor Ragnarok is a blast in terms of just adventure fun time. I like all the alien stuff. I like Hulk getting a big role. All that stuff's really good. Number 10, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So we're in the top 10, so I guess this is the prestigious section of the list, and I'm sure there's some movies that people are going, wait, he's still not said that, oh my god, that's in the top 10. I know, guys, I know, bear with me. Guardians of the Galaxy 2, it was a movie that I did find a little bit disappointing when I watched it. Not because it's not good, because it is actually very good still. But there was definitely, the reason why it's ranking lower than the first movie is because I feel like it does have some pacing issues, especially with, because the film kind of splits into two plots. And there's a plot that follows Rocket and Yondu and those characters, and there's a plot that follows Star-Lord and Gamora and those characters. And I felt that those characters, the Star-Lord plot, actually kind of dragged the pacing down. It kind of felt like they were waiting around for things to happen for portions of the film. But everything in the other plot's fantastic, and the final act, where all the action's going up, is fantastic. And those are the things that I want from Guardians of the Galaxy based on the first movie. So, and the first movie's pacing's so good. So that's something that stuck out to me. But there's a lot I like in here. I like the story that, Gamora and Nebula go through. I like, obviously, the humor returns is really fun. And I like the all the action at the end. I love the development of Yondu as a character, and his plot with Rocket is so much fun. And those things have the heart of the movies. And I think that's something that I've been repeating a lot during this list, is that Marvel movies don't necessarily have the most nail biting stakes of movies, but they have fun and heart. And if they have the heart, that's the thing that I'll come to for more than anything else with these movies, if they can nail that. And I think this movie has that in spades. It's just a shame that the pacing kind of lets it down a little bit versus some of the films that are higher on this list. Number 9, Avengers Age of Ultron. Yes, Age of Ultron made it into my top 10. And I know people are going to critique this, and they're going to say, wait, why is this so high? Well, here's the thing. Age of Ultron does have problems. It is kind of messy. It's a little bit overstuffed, like some of the other films have been. But here's the thing. Age of Ultron, despite the fact that it's a bit overstuffed, is very true to what it is. And I will say that I was disappointed with the characterization of Ultron himself. However, why I kind of love this movie is, outside of all the character interactions being gold, which is something that once they started teaming up and having crossovers and team-up movies, is something that Marvel's done very well. But the reason why I actually love this movie, and I think what redeems it in a big way, is I think the final act is one of the best final acts of anything in this whole franchise. This final act, and a part of this is almost like an antidote to a movie that came out 2 years previously, Batman v Superman, not Batman v Superman, Man of Steel. Man of Steel came out, and one of the big complaints at the end of that movie was how much destruction there was, and how he didn't seem to care that anyone was dying, that millions of people were dying while he was fighting Zod. This movie, the entire last act, is about saving people. It's about making sure that the people in the city that they're fighting in are protected and saved. And that is goal number one almost the entire time. And that is what it focuses on. And for whatever else you want to throw at this movie, it feels heroic. It feels like they care. It feels like this is what superheroes should be doing. And it filled me with the childlike kind of heroic joy that I want from these characters. And there's lots of great action beats. I love the introduction of Vision. I like Scarlet Witch. Quicksilver. Not everything adds up. And Hawkeye gets more to do versus the first movie, which is really nice. And yeah, there's some messy elements. They just set up for Thor's search for the Infinity Stones, pretty rough. But the farm stuff is really good and sets up the themes of Civil War better than almost anything. As this is the two things I always compare to. The Thor stuff sets up the Infinity Stones, and it feels really messy and shoehorned in. The stuff on the farm with Tony and Steve feels really natural, feels like it makes sense in the context of the movie, and does a really good job of setting up the conflict that's going to happen in Civil War. So I think it's much better in that sense. Age of Ultron, I will defend it to a point. I think there's, a lot of positive qualities in there. Number 8, Black Panther. Black Panther, another character I knew nothing about before Civil War, and of course we got a little bit of him there, and we come into Black Panther, his solo movie, and I'm like, okay, let's see what this does. Let's see what a Black Panther movie is and what the character is. And I think, I'll get the problem out of the way. I do think the third act, the CGI fight between him and the villain, is pretty lame. And that's a shame. It's a shame that it kind of divulges into this really bad cartoon fight. However, what separates this movie is it has one of the most interesting and, to an extent, believable villains of the entire franchise. So many of the movies that I've mentioned up until this point have had weak villains. And they're just there because we need a villain. This is one of the first villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe where his motivations are actually fascinating. Killmonger's reason for wanting to fight Black Panther and wanting to unleash Wakanda's weaponry upon the world is a sympathetic motivation. He talks obviously it's the first black superhero, so that there's a lot of weight that comes with that and pulling that off. But the idea that the villain wants to arm black people around the world and to rise up, it's not the right way to go about it, but you can't help but understand why he feels that way. and it's actually very fascinating. And it becomes this moral debate, this ideological debate. And one of my favorite things in superhero movies, when they're done right, and superhero stories in general, is a debate of ideology. It's one of my favorite things about The Dark Knight, one of the best superhero movies ever goddamn made, is that it's about the ideology of Batman and the Joker trying to break it and prove it wrong. And that is what makes that movie fascinating to me. So this movie is about that ideological conflict, where you understand the sides. And obviously there's a lot, again, there's good humor, there's good characters. Shuri is, of course, a fan favorite, very, very entertaining. So yeah, Black Panther, what was a landmark movie obviously in movies in general for having the first sort of lead black superhero and be highly successful at that. But it's also a landmark film to me in the MCU because it actually had an interesting villain. So, yay. Number 7, Iron Man 3. And if anything's going to piss people off on this ranking, on this video, it's going to be my placement of Iron Man 3, because people hate Iron Man 3. They think it's bad, and I'm going to tell you why you're wrong. Iron Man 3 is a buddy cop movie directed by Shane Black. You know, the director of The Nice Guys, the writer of a number of movies, Long Kiss Goodnight, all the Lethal Weapon movies. And that's what this movie is. And if I have one disappointment about the MCU, is that we never got Iron Man 4 directed by Shane Black, because I wanted it. People get upset about the Mandarin. I don't care about the Mandarin. I don't give a shit about the Mandarin. I care about Tony and the kid. And, you know, because Shane Black does the wisecracking kid better than anyone. I care about Tony and Rhodey. Rhodey, yes. War Machine, Don Cheadle. I care about that relationship. They have this great buddy cop thing. He has the buddy cop thing going with the kid. He has it going with War Machine. It's very, all this stuff is great. I really appreciate the humor in this movie, the action, the pacing is one of the best of any of the solo Marvel movies. And, I have a blast with this movie. Iron Man 3, I think is easily the best Iron Man movie. Because I think it's the most well put together. I love everything in the town when he's like fighting back without his suit. He's got a little bit of tech. He's working with a kid. All of this stuff is great. I find this more endearing than the other Iron Man movies, and I think it's got the best music as well. The scores from Brian Tyler is very good. So Iron Man 3, I think it's a fun time. It's really good. Plus the fact that he's got kind of PTSD from Avengers is also really interesting. So yay, I'm all about Iron Man 3. Number 6, Avengers Infinity War. So we're getting very high up in this list now, and for some people this might actually still be too low. Avengers Infinity War, I love. I think this is a great movie. I think we're at the point in this list now where I have very little caveats to any of the entries that I'm saying. Like, up until now, even Black Panther, I still had the caveat of a weak Act 3. Infinity War, I think, is fantastic. And I said that, when Civil War came out, I was feeling kind of down in the MCU, and I didn't like Doctor Strange. That was right at the bottom of my list, and that was the next one out. So in 2016, I was feeling very down in the MCU. And in 2017, while I liked some of the movies, there was definitely some drawbacks to some of them. Infinity War was the movie that came out and made me excited about the MCU again. Even though there was good movies out between, in 2017 that I liked, there were standalone movies, there were just solo characters. Infinity War made me realize again why I loved, the team-ups, why I loved, Age of Ultron, why I loved Avengers. And Infinity War, again, much like Black Panther did, gave me an interest in villain. In fact, the villain is arguably the protagonist of Infinity War, and it deals with Thanos, and we get all these characters. We obviously get the Guardians mixing in with some of the Avenger characters. We get other character team-ups we've not had before. And the movie has this ending, which I won't talk about too much, even though everyone knows about what it is at this point. But I think it has a ballsy ending. I love that it ends the way it does. And again, it's got the character interactions, the team ups, the humor, all the things that you love about the Marvel movies. But it has this biting thing at the end, which actually feels like the first time that it's really had severe stakes in the whole franchise. Some people hate that people say the Marvel movies have no stakes, but for a long time I don't think they did. For a long time I was feeling like it was going through the motions in terms of the villains and the plots. You were there for other reasons, so you didn't really mind as much, but the actual, the threat of what was going to happen never really felt like a big deal that much. Infinity War changed that. Infinity War made it feel like, no, we can actually do a villain that feels like he can win and may in fact do win. So Infinity War, gold. Number 5, Spider-Man Homecoming. This was such a surprise to me when it came out. Not that I was expecting a bad movie per se, but like, like I say, I wasn't feeling so hot in the Marvel movies at a time. And while I like Guardians enough to make it at number 10, Guardians 2 that is, I did have some caveats with it. And Spider-Man Homecoming came out, and it was like, I love how focused this movie is. Like, I honestly think that Spider-Man Homecoming has one of the best character arcs of any one of the single solo Marvel movies. I think his arc where he learns his strength, and there's some great moments in the third act where he makes a choice about who he is, and it's about who he thinks he wants to be when he's talking to Iron Man, and then who he actually is in making those choices, those tough choices about who he is. And it feels downright heroic. It feels like a character who, the odds are against him, which it should be with Spider-Man, because that's very much a Spider-Man thing. But he makes the right choices, and he ends up feeling more heroic than a lot of other characters in the MCU because of that. He has the journey that I want in a superhero movie, where his decision to be a hero feels earned, and it feels like it has an impact on his character. And again, to compare it to Man of Steel again, there's no point in Man of Steel where I feel like Superman makes a choice to be a hero. And I say this as a Superman fan who wants a good Superman movie. Part of the reason why I hate the Snyder Superman is because he never goes through that journey. He never really feels like he makes that choice. He's just kind of doing it because he feels like he's supposed to. Spider-Man in Homecoming makes that choice, and it is glorious. And all the side characters are great. I love Ned. I love Zendaya's character. I love and Michael Keaton. While I don't think the villain is necessarily an amazing villain in the grand scheme of things, I think he works perfectly well because he's a threat to Peter directly. And because of that, he is a better villain than 90% of the Marvel movies, because it feels like he actually is dangerous to Peter. And that is why he works as a villain in that movie. So Spider-Man Homecoming, I think, is easily the best Spider-Man movie. Fans of Spider-Man 2 can, fight me on that. But, Tobey Maguire, I think, is miscast in the role. I think Kristen Dunst is miscast as MJ. I think the action's great in Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man Homecoming has the heart and the character story that I want in a Spider-Man movie. And I love that the action wasn't super over the top either. That they kept it like, no, he's still a rookie. He's still, struggling. He's not been that high. He's not swinging from skyscrapers yet. But we'll get there, hopefully, assuming the deal with Sony doesn't run out and they renew it. But Spider-Man Homecoming, big surprise for me, and I loved it. It's also one of the funniest movies in the whole thing as well. There's a joke with the teacher when he's on TV talking about the attack that broke me. I was in hysterics in the theater because I was not expecting such a dark joke. I won't spoil it, but it was really good. Number 4, Captain America: Winter Soldier. Yes. So I put Captain America: The First Avenger in second last place on this list. Winter Soldier is such a goddamn turnaround, it is not even remotely funny. This is, Avengers, to an extent, of course, sold me on Captain America as a character in a way that the solo movie never did. Winter Soldier takes that and made me love the character. It made it this kind of thriller. The relationship with Falcon I like, the relationship with Black Widow I really like. It gave me some great action sequences. One of the things that I really was disappointed in the first Captain America is that I didn't like any of the action at all. I thought they were all dull. All the action scenes in the first Captain America are dull as shit. They're bad green screen. They're just not fun. Within minutes of Winter Soldier, I'm probably exaggerating there, but the first action scene on the boat where he's running around with a shield, there's more stuff in that scene that I like in terms of action than the entire first movie. The way he's using parkour, the way he's throwing the shield around, the way it's shot, the way it works is just what I think Captain America should feel like in action. And later on, he's dodging jets, he's doing all these things. His relationship with Winter Soldier is really interesting. I think Winter Soldier actually, it's kind of a weird murky one to count as a villain because, of course, of where that story goes. But I will say Winter Soldier's entrance when he attacks Nick Fury in that movie is one of the best villain entrances of the entire franchise. He feels like the Terminator, and I love it. It made me feel things, again, menace from the villain in a way that I hadn't up until that point in the franchise. And while I think, of course, we've had Thanos since, we've had, Killmonger, I think Winter Soldier, in terms of pure, he is someone who's going to come in and just kill us. Like, he's unstoppable, and Captain America might have a hard time in his hands dealing with this. Is great. Winter Soldier is obviously rarely loved. I am not alone in loving this movie, but it is one of the best in the entire franchise. So, yes. Number 4, Avengers Endgame. Yeah, so the newest entry, obviously, everyone's expecting where's that going to land. It's presumably fairly high because it was really good. I like this a bit more Infinity War, and I think that's down to taste. Some people like Infinity War more. I think for me, the reason why I like Endgame, as much as I like the darker ending, as much as I like what Infinity War does, and I really do, there's something about culmination that it just feels so sweet when they do it right and they build up. And I've compared Endgame to the series finale of a TV show. The way I felt when Fringe ended, the way I felt when Lost ended, the way I felt when Breaking Bad ended. There's an element of finality in a series finale when you've spent years with characters that cannot be matched. And this is the first time a movie's really felt that way. And the entire last hour of this movie is nothing but great feelings because things are paying off in spades. And they saved elements they didn't do in previous movies for this one, and it feels special and earned because they waited so long to do it. So, I mean, I don't want to get into it too much. I want to still keep this spoiler free, especially for Endgame, because it's the new one that's just been out for, just not even a full week yet. But it is a special time, and if you've been enjoying these movies, at least some of these movies, if you're enjoying the Avengers movies especially, Endgame is a special time in the theater, and I feel like it's no point in selling you on it because everyone's going to see it anyway. It's made $1 bazillion at this point, but Endgame is full of heartwarming, crowd-pleasing moments that get you sort of fist pumping. It's the sort of thing that can bring you to tears, but not in a sad way, right? Where you're brought to tears because something just feels so right, where it just feels so good. That's why Endgame's here. Number 2, Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy from James Gunn is a phenomenal movie. I think it is one of the best paced movies in the entire MCU. In fact, that's why I criticize the pace of Guardians 2, is I think Guardians 1 is always moving forward. It is an excellent science fiction action movie with likable characters who banter off each other. I'm a big fan of Firefly, and there's definitely elements of Firefly in this ragtag team of characters. I love Rocket, I love Drax, I love Gamora, I love Quill. I love Groot. I love all the characters so much. The villain isn't that amazing. that is perfectly fair. But this is one of those movies where it overcomes that so well because every scene is funny or exciting or visually looks really interesting. I think Guardians of the Galaxy is legitimately probably the best looking movie in the MCU. I think some of the movies suffer from looking very basic and TV show-esque. But this movie does not feel that way at all. This movie has style. It looks good. I love the design of the planets. I think the final battle feels huge, despite the fact that it has to be topped later. There's so many great moments. There's redemption for certain characters. It feels a lot of familiar plot beats for characters coming together and eventually agreeing to try and save the day. And as Quill puts it, it's our chance to give a shit. But that moment still works for me, and I love all these characters so much. It's one of these things where obviously I didn't know anything about these characters before the movie came out, like I did a lot of these characters, but I think this is the one where I came out of the movie the most being like, I love these characters. And can't wait for 3. And number 1, no surprises, because obviously there's only one movie left, and it's maybe a boring pick, it's maybe one that people don't agree with, but to this day, even in Endgame, I don't think tops the feeling of seeing the Avengers for the first time in 2012. And it got close. Like, Endgame reminded me how that movie felt at numerous times, especially in that last hour. But seeing Avengers in 2012 when no one had really brought characters together before, sure, there was some cameos in previous Marvel movies from other ones, and Nick Fury was popping up over the place. But seeing the team actually form, seeing the team actually come together, and seeing them, that's wraparound shot of them in a circle as the main theme blares out, the moment of triumph, the moment where this is what we've been building up to for the last 5 years. Nothing in the theater has really quite captured that specific feeling for me, and it felt special. I went back and saw it the very next day. I saw it like 4 or 5 times in the theaters, and I loved the first Avengers. And it helps that I'm a big Joss Whedon fan who directed the film and wrote the film. The writing more so. I mean, as a director, Joss Whedon's okay. Like, he's serviceable. It's the writing from Joss Whedon that makes his characters pop. And the Marvel humor lends itself very well to the way he writes characters. The movie's very funny. It's again, much like Endgame, it's a crowd pleaser, and it's the start of the journey. If Endgame's the end of the journey, in a lot of ways, the first Avengers is the start of that journey. It's the first movie where I like Captain America because I didn't like his first movie. I actually, I mentioned how Iron Man 1 and 2, especially 2, didn't have a whole lot of Iron Man action. I felt Avengers had way more good Iron Man scenes than either of those first two Iron Man movies did. Um, I like the Thor scenes. Obviously, I like Black Widow. Hawkeye, of course, gets a little bit gimped in that movie, but it serves the plot, and he does have some good moments, regardless. And I love Hulk. I love Hulk as a character. I was happy to see Hulk. I think Hulk, finally turning up in the third act is my favorite moment in the movie. I think it's a lot of people's favorite moments in the movie. And it's this, acceptance of who we are and then, willing to fight back. That movie was an event, and Endgame is an event because they pulled off the start and the end. There's some bumps in the middle for sure, but they pulled off the start and the end, and Avengers was special, and it still feels special. So that is my ranking of the MCU. That is my ranking of all 22 cinematic universe movies from Marvel. Obviously, there's going to be more. There's going to be a new Spider-Man movie in a couple of months, and maybe in a few years' time I'll do this again when we have 30 plus movies. But we have 22 movies, and if I'm going to look at them as a whole and say where are the cutoffs for like the quality levels, I will say I think there's 6 or 7 really great to fantastic movies. I think there's then a batch of really strong movies, and then I think there's a batch of enjoyable but lots of very flawed movies, and then I think the bottom like 3 or 4 are the sort of the bad movies that are just mostly pretty bad. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. But yeah, so hopefully you had fun listening to me ramble on about the Marvel movies. Hopefully you had some surprising picks in here, and hopefully you don't tear me to shreds in the comments because you highly disagree about Captain America or Iron Man 3. But suck it, basically.